Um, Good evening, everyone. On behalf of ICMDA South Asia, we welcome you to this webinar, Set Free, Live Free. My name is Kristen, and I'm a junior medical resident currently working in Lam Hospital from Bangladesh. So we'll begin with a word of prayer. Can I ask Dr. Samundra, ma'am, please? Can you pray for the evening?
Let's pray. Father God, we come to you, Lord. Thank you for this opportunity to come together, Lord. Thank you, Lord, that you are the God of healthy, Lord. Lord, we want to just come together to listen and hear from you, Lord, especially this important topic that you have given us to discuss. Thank you for our speaker and facilitators, Lord. Lord, I pray that, Lord, your anointing, your presence, your protection will be over this time as we come together, Lord. And thank you, Lord, that, Lord, we can depend on your spirit, Lord, and we can look to you, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, ma'am. As you know, the session has been organized by ICMDA South Asia in association with the National Christian Medical Fellowship of South Asian Countries. So I would like to invite Dr. Tool to give us a brief overview on ICMDA. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll share my screen. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Tul. I'm working in one mission hospital in Nepal called Tansen Mission Hospital. It's my privilege to meet all of you from different parts of the South Asia and also from speaker from Philippines, I think, and to get connected with all the young people. So, sorry. So basically, I'll give a short, brief introduction of ICMD. ICMD is a big global family of ever-growing fellowship of young people. It comprises of students, young graduates, and senior doctors from all over the world. And I'm delighted to be part of this family. And it gives me immense pleasure to introduce you about ICMDA. So even though it's an international Christian Medical and Dental Association, but since lately, we have been working closely with the other Christian allied health groups like Nurses Association, Paramedic Association like physiotherapists, lab pharmacists, and that has helped a lot of growth in our activities in doing God's ministry. So now it's not only limited to doctors, it is open to all the Christian health care workers. So, and why we are in healing ministry is because Jesus himself, when he chose 12 disciples, he sent them out with the power and authority to heal the people and to do God's kingdom work. It's not just the healing ministry, it's also doing God's kingdom work through the work that we do. So we all know that a lot of people, far more than people that goes through our hospitals and clinics every day. Churches in the West are decreasing, even though in the other parts of the world, people are increasing, but that cannot match the number of people that comes through our hospitals. Even in our very small mission hospital in Tansen, every day on an average, we see like 400 people. Whereas in our local church, every week, only 5 to 10 new people come to our fellowship. So it's a big amount of people that is coming to our hospitals. In WHO gives a figure of 1.2 million medical students in 2,600 medical schools and 550 dental schools. And there are 12 million doctors and over 7 lakh dentists all over the world, providing service through 3,75,000 healthcare facilities, including 84,000 district, provincial, and specialist hospitals. And if we see the history, Christian doctors and dentists have the large amount of access to the skills and resources as compared to past. Now we have a lot of young doctors, even in Nepal. Just 1.5 decades ago, we had doctors we could count in our fingers. Now we have a lot of Nepali doctors, more than 100 in our fellowship. So it's a lot of blessing that God is doing in our fellowship. Just imagine that there was a Christian Medical and Dental Association in every country, uniting and equipping all the Christian doctors and dentists and the healthcare workers. And imagine that there was a Christian doctor and dentist in every community, showing God's love and doing His will and doing healing ministry. And just imagine that there was an organization which linked all these national groups all over the world. And that is where ICMD comes in picture. Our vision is to be a Christian witness through doctors and dentists and healthcare workers in every community, in every nation. And to achieve this vision, we help to start a new fellowship, national fellowship, or even help them grow whatever fellowship they have in that particular country, help them to grow, And it's not only just doctors group, we help all the other Christian paramedic groups also in that fellowship. And how we help them is we do fellowship with them, we keep them through a lot of training. I myself took a lot of training through ICMDA. Just to name few, I did servant leadership a few years back, and it has helped me to grow personally, and to get a bigger picture of God's kingdom work, and to get connected with the bigger global fellowship. And it has given me a new perspective in my life, a new purpose, Even though I am in a small place in Nepal, I am connected with the big, larger global family that helps me to grow spiritually and also in my practice. So here we work closely with the young students and young doctors to equip them, with all the training tracks. We have more than 14 online training tracks that are going on in every region of the world. So for us, the inspiration is the great physician, Lord Jesus Christ himself. So going through the history of ICMDA, some countries like UK and USA had their national fellowship, Christian Medical and Dental Association, for more than 100 years. But it's only in 1950s that six of this national fellowship came together, and they thought, let's open a bigger and international fellowship. So that's when in 1963 they had the first international congress in Amsterdam, and they subsequently went on to do in initially I think every 4 or 5 years. Now we are having every 4 years. Correct me, Bhaskarji, if I'm correct. So I personally attended 2018 World Congress in Hyderabad, and it was an immense pleasure for me to see a lot of people from all over the world. It was like a heaven when we were worshiping. People of different color, different sizes, worshiping God in their own language. It was almost like a heaven. So we want you to be connected in that fellowship, global family. Now the last one I attended in Tanzania. We were 107 countries, and God is working in tremendous way, and then we are seeing it to grow continuously. So if you are a Christian doctor, dentist, or a healthcare worker, or even a Christian student, who does not have connection with the national fellowship in your particular country, please let us know, because we have good contacts in every region and almost every country in the world. We have some contacts. So if you want to get connected to this big movement that God is helping to grow, please, and to be part of it, please let us know. This is the age of technology, so we have our own website, icmd.net, and you can get a lot of webinar videos, a lot of materials in YouTube, so you can get connected with us in Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. So please let us know. And this is the graph showing exponential growth of our fellowship from 6 in 1963 to 107 in Tanzania. And next one, we are going to have a fellowship in South Korea, international fellowship in South Korea. And we expect that we might be 120 or even more. So these are the 14 major regions in the world. If we see from my left side, we can divide into North America, Central America, South America, Europe and Eurasia, then comes down to Middle East and North America, West Africa, Francophone Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa, South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Oceania. So we have contacts in all these regions. So if you have some Christian students who have not got into fellowship, or young doctors who are struggling to get connected with the fellowship, Christian fellowship there, please let us know. We'll help you to get connected. And coming to South Asia, uh, most of the countries are a member of ICMDA, apart from Bhutan and Maldives. So in Bhutan, we have contacts, few doctors and nurses that we work together. And in Maldives, Sri Lanka is doing a tremendous job in helping to grow in that fellowship. So when we have another picture I didn't put. That green means the full member of the ICMDA. Orange means we have contact group, and in the blue means that we have individual contacts, and gray means no contact. There are very few countries now that have no contacts. We almost have some contacts in almost every country in the world. So we give thanks to God for doing this amazing work. And this is the last slide. This is the picture of last South Asia conference, youth conference that we had in Dulikil, Kathmandu. And you can see Dr. Peter Saunders, the current CEO of ICMDA. Next to him is Dr. Santosh Matthew, our regional secretary of South Asia, and his wife, Dr. Anita, Dr. Vikas, our Nepali president, and myself, Dr. Samundra, Dr. Rumala. So it's a big movement that is going around. So thank you so much for this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tul. Good evening, everyone. This is Joshua Jamil. I'm from Pakistan. I'm a final year medical student here in Pakistan. And today I'll be your co-host for the evening along with Dr. Kristen. We thank Dr. Tul for sharing about the ICMDA and all the work that ICMDA is doing around the world. With that, a few house rules before we begin. Please make sure all your mics are on mute. And once the session is over, we will have a Q&A time. As the speaker is speaking, please feel free to write your queries, your questions in the chat. Or if for some reason you are uncomfortable writing in the group chat, then you can personally message me or Dr. Christine, and we will pose the questions on your behalf. With that, let me introduce today's first speaker, Dr. Dheeraj K. Dr. Dheeraj is a psychiatrist with additional training in addiction psychiatry. Dr. Dheeraj is the Associate Professor of Psychiatry at Christian Medical College, Vellore, and he's done some great work among the youth regarding the topic of addiction. And I would request him to please kindly take over, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you all. I'll speak for about 20 minutes. During this period, we will understand what addiction is. We'll see some cases and look at how to diagnose addiction. We'll see some neurobiological factors behind addiction, discuss about risk factors and protective factors regarding addiction, and touch upon treatment. So addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and individuals' life experiences. This is the definition given by American Society of Addiction Medicine. So given this, keep this definition in mind and look at this case. John is a medical student. He is at the age of 17. His seniors made him smoke a cigarette during ragging, and he enjoyed it. And he started smoking occasionally. During exam seasons, he started smoking daily. The number of cigarettes increased slowly from up to 15 cigarettes per day by the time he was in final MBBS. He would have the urge to smoke soon after he woke up. He would feel irritable and he would not be able to concentrate without smoke. he was unable to control even though he tried to cut it down. And he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And despite that, he did not stop. He also suffered from asthma, but he continued to smoke. So keep this case in your mind. Also look at the case of Jane, a 27-year-old intern in India who graduated from Ukraine. She had experienced armed conflict. She had failed her foreign medical graduate exam on 2 occasions. So she was in some form of stress. She was not being paid a stipend by in the hospital that she was working. Her father, who had supported her all through, had suffered a stroke a year ago. So after work, she started playing online chess, and the duration of which had increased from half an hour per day to about 8 hours in a period of 8 months. So she's not sleeping properly and playing in the nights. Unable to control even during in the workplace, also she is playing chess. Missing calls from home and work, and she's not preparing for the PG entrance exam that she is required to. So the question for you all is, are John and Jane addicts? I mean, I can't see the chat now, but I request the participants to that yes or no in the chat. Yeah, yeah, I can see the chat. If yes, 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 yes. A lot of people are saying yes. Okay, so of course, the word can we address them as addicts? That's a different question. We can say that they're people with addiction, uh, because the word addiction has there's no problem, but the word addict seems to have a lot of stigma attached to it. So we should be a little conscious regarding the use of certain terms which could be very negatively interpreted. Go to the next slide. So, how do we diagnose addiction? Or in ICD, we are not in the ICMDA North America group. If we were so, we'll be using DSM criteria. But we are, this is an international classification by World Health Organization, which the 11th version has 3 features for addiction. One is losing control on how they start the initiation of the substance use, or the amounts of the substance consumed, or even seizing the drinking episode or the usage episode. So losing control, the person may think that he wants to drink only one large drink, but he would actually end up drinking 180 ml, not 60. So that kind of phenomena is loss of control. Salience is when the substance or the behavior becomes central to your life. Like they're always thinking about it. They're structuring their life around it. Like in the case of Jane, even in between her patients, she's taking out her mobile and she's playing chess. So life is going around chess. Now, there are physiological features that are there when the person doesn't take substance. Those features are called withdrawal features. If they're present, that means a person's it has moved forward from use into addiction. Uh, the same effect, the amount that a person used to use will not give the same amount of effect. The amount that he used in the past would not give the same effect as time passes. That's called tolerance. So these features are there. We can say this person has addiction or dependence. Now, for behavioral addictions, we do not clearly have this tolerance of it. There are some features, but it's not driven like because of the way the body changes with respect to drug use. It doesn't change with behaviors, but there are still psychological effects. So physiological features is not part of criteria for behavioral addictions, but continuation and escalation of those behaviors despite negative consequences. Like in the case of John, he was continuing to use cigarettes despite having asthma and tuberculosis. So though that kind of course that's a substance, but that's a continuation due to despite harm. But in the case of Jane, even if she was suspended, she will continue to do that. So now that you get a feel of the how to diagnose it, you should also know that only gaming and gambling are officially considered behavioral addictions. Though in normal culture, we all see that a person who's using a lot of internet is considered as having is addicted to internet. Yeah, he's always with the phone and he's addicted to mobile. We talk about these things, but officially these are not considered addictions. But the logic behind how a person develops gaming addiction, they internet use, mobile use, pornography, shopping, exercise, uh, uh, even addicted to being in relationships, creating chaos. These are all being described in literature now, but officially they are not yet addictions. But we have to understand that whatever gives pleasure has a tendency to pull us into it more and more and make us get into it, make us get addicted. So we should be watchful about these. So a time for another quiz. Imagine there are many in a college there are many classes. Each class has about 100 students. So each class decides to experiment with one drug by taking only once. So one class, 100 students take cannabis. Another class, 100 students take heroin. A third class, they take cocaine, flunitrazepam, ketamine, all the substances that you can think of, they have taken. So, and we are following all these people for rest of their lives. So, students of which class do you think had maximum number of people who were addicted to that particular substance that they had taken? Please answer in the chat. Basically, which substance is Samuel Subba says nicotine. Others, no, they have taken only once. Later, how they take is different. So at the end of it all, which addiction, which substance would have maximum number of addicts? If you can use that word, people with addiction. Smartphone, people, alcohol, heroin. I don't know if Dr. Manish Joshi meant heroin addiction or heroin addiction. Okay, I'll give the answer. Cocaine. I'm happy that you've thought of all these substances. This is the answer. Nicotine. 32% of the people will become dependent over time after just one use. 32% of the people who smoke first one cigarette will end up becoming dependent. For heroin, it's 23, quite high only. Cocaine 17, alcohol 15. All these answers people have given. In fact, we are all afraid of cannabis. Cannabis is actually the dependence potential is a little less compared to other substances. So just keep this in mind. Now, next time for another question. Yeah. Which is among all the substances available in the world, which substance inflicts maximum amount of harm on mankind? Again, time for answers in the chat. Which substance causes maximum of damage? Maybe less people are taking, but maximum damage it will cause to the society. What do you think? Cannabis, heroin, alcohol. No other options, sir? Okay, now I'll give the answer. They have actually tried to quantify the harms caused by different substances, both harm to themselves and harm to other people, and they found that alcohol is the one which causes maximum amount of harm. It also causes the maximum amount of harm to others. The proportion of harm to others is much higher in alcohol than any other substance. Uh, Again, if we see mushrooms, buprenorphine, all these are the harm caused is actually much lesser compared to alcohol. Tobacco also quite high. Now we'll see the deaths. So this was harms, all types of harms together, not just deaths alone. If we see deaths alone, tobacco is the number one killer with ischemic heart disease, strokes, COPD, everything put together. The number one killer is tobacco. Interestingly, both alcohol and tobacco are legal in most countries, but the amount of damage they cause is very, very high. Something to be kept in mind. Now, we should understand that there's addiction cycle. Suddenly, why do people, how does a person become an addict? First, they start using, they get some pleasure, they start using again and again, and then slowly the pleasure comes down. So they increase the amount, and afterwards, when they're not taking, so when they're getting pleasure, that stage is the binge or intoxication stage. So after they get used to the substance for a while, when they are not taking the substance, they become uncomfortable, and their body goes through changes, which gives them a bad mood, irritable mood, pain. So this phase is called withdrawal or negative affect stage. If he doesn't take substance, if he takes the substance at this point, again he'll feel normal. But if he doesn't take the substance, these symptoms will go, but his mind will be preoccupied with when will I take next, when will I take next. So they will be preoccupied with and they will have this anticipation phase. Now these things though are described are having strong neurobiological basis. So the binge intoxication phase is very clearly related to uh, dopamine being the levels of dopamine being increased in nucleus accumbens from the ventral tegmental area. Similarly, the stress related hormones are all involved in withdrawal phase. This prefrontal cortex is involved in the anticipation, which plans these activities, how to procure, how to steal money to get my fix for heroin, like that. So there's a lot of biology also behind addiction once addiction develops. So there's a choice when a person uses drugs, but there's no choice once a person becomes addicted. So they will use compulsively. So if we see when a person first takes drugs, initially when they take drug, they will like it and they'll also want it. But as days go by, liking starts decreasing. However, then they continue to take the drug because they need to feel normal. So liking keeps decreasing, but they're continuing to use. They need it, they want it. So the wanting keeps increasing. So when a person becomes completely addicted, he may hate it, but he will want it. So that's the state of many, many drug addicts. So many people think, okay, these guys are taking these drugs because they are pleasure seeking people. No, once they become addicted, they're not seeking pleasure anymore. They are actually trying to just overcome their the negative effects. So the liking and wanting becomes very, very different. So they'll start wanting it more than liking it. Liking is an issue in new users who are yet to become addicted. So then this graph again shows the intensity of positive reinforcement, the kick, as the days go by, it comes down. But the negative reinforcement, the pain, the difficulties, the body undergoes when the substance is not available, that keeps increasing as the addiction progresses in its course. So what are the risk factors and protective factors? So we all know that as medical people, we take family history. Uh, Family history is quite linked. There are genetics, there are the ORPM1 gene, dopamine, DRD2 gene, which are all related to increase the risk of addiction. Also, comorbidity. The people with attention deficit hyperactivity, they have tendency to abuse stimulants or use cigarettes. People with anxiety, depression may self-medicate uh, with uh, treatment with alcohol to overcome their anxiety, etc. So there are biological risk factors for addiction. There are also psychological risk factors. The personality traits of impulsivity, people who act before they think through. So there's a tendency for them to get addicted. There are some of us who are extremely sensation seeking. They're like new experiences. This is a personality trait. You can't really overcome it. Some people don't care about new experiences. Some people are very sensation seeking. Some of us have this radar which tells us no, this is dangerous, don't go. We assess risk, but some of us are not able to. So this people with low harm avoidance, high levels of neuroticism, poor coping skills, and those who have tendency for aggression, which can be seen early in school. Even in school days you can see this kind of aggression. They have All these guys have higher risk of developing addiction. There are environmental causes also, which Valerie ma'am will touch this aspect in more detail. Stress that is experienced in childhood, and even the current levels of stress, the modeling that a child sees, a child who's seeing father drinking is more likely to drink than a child who sees father struggling with life but still not using drinking, but using other ways to solve his life problems. Children, adolescents who are not supervised adequately, uh, those who lack bonding with their peers, siblings, and parents, those who these people have higher risk. Acceptance of substance use by peers. If you have friends who in whom drinking and smoking is the norm, there's a high chance that the child will also start accepting that as the norm and start using. There are availability issues, like I live in southern part of India, where we don't the supply of heroin and all is not much. But I had lived in northern part, where because of uh, the uh, closer closeness to the borders, they had a bigger heroin problem. So availability makes a big difference. So I don't see heroin users in South India, but I see pharmacological opioid users in South India. So availability changes the kind of pattern. Also, we should remember that people who are good in studies or academics, they usually will have probably higher IQ, better coping skills, maybe coming from better family backgrounds. Uh, they they have lesser chance for going into addiction. Those who have academic failures, who have learning disability, teachers are scolding them, they are not accepted by peers, they get bullied. So they will create another set of friends who are also like them, and they go into a deviant path. So there we should understand that uh, when you see a patient with addiction, the risk factors he has are quite different from what you have had or what your friends have had. So we need to see them with different light. And see them with grace. So keep that in mind, and also ensure that our children, our friends will be getting the protective factors, and not the risk factors. Whatever can be modifiable. We should remember that addictions do cause complications, like physical health issues, like liver issues and alcohol, or injection drug users will have this hepatitis viruses, hep C, hep B, things like that. Mental health issues, of course, mental health issues are risk factor for using substances also, but mental health issues come due to the substance use. Some drugs can cause psychosis, like cannabis, people have pointed out, can cause psychosis. even if not directly causing mental health issues, the guilt and shame that are related to substance use will have mental health impact. uh, Socially, people will use respect. Occupational, they may be absenteeism. uh, uh, they may be fired. They'll have frequent changes in jobs. There will be marital dissatisfaction. There will be marital conflicts when one of the persons is using substances. There will be sexual dysfunction. uh, and many of these are seen also in behavioral addictions, like people who watch a lot of pornography or may have sexual dysfunction in real life. So that's something to be kept in mind. uh, Financial problems because they're spending money on these addictions, legal issues, and of course spiritual problems. They're not going to enjoy their spiritual life as much. They'll feel guilty, and they will not have the rich spiritual life that they would have aspired for. So interestingly, these risk factors, consequences are all meshed in addiction. So when a patient comes, he's uh, they come with all these problems, and we need to kind of deal with this complex maze of issues that they may be having. So how do we manage? So uh, assess the severity of the problems that they have. uh, See for comorbidity, what are the physical and psychological comorbidities they have, so that we can treat those adequately. Look for the complications and treat the complications. The goal is abstinence in cases of substances. So substances, there is nothing like I'll drink in a controlled manner. uh, in the Western countries, sometimes they target that type of a that they have that type of a goal, but I've never seen it work in India. uh, so in case of substances, abstinence should be the goal. But in case of behavioral addictions, like gaming for example, uh, abstinence doesn't work at all. In the plan itself, our discussion will be more related to, you should game in such a way that it's not affecting your life. You should have more control on other aspects of life, but in a controlled form you can game. So that should be the goal in for behavioral addictions, given that many behavioral addictions are in line with normal behaviors. For example, eating or sex or shopping, or these are all part of normal life, which in this person has taken a pathological turn. So you can't just stop those activities without bigger consequences in life. So keep that in mind. So assess where they are. People actually, many times they are not even thinking of changing. They are happy in their own world. They're set. Everything is adjusted according to that. Especially even if they're not addicted, if they're using substances or involved in excessive mobile use or watching porn or something, they don't want to change. They're happy in their life, but there will be a crisis at a time when they start thinking, okay, what I'm doing is wrong. I may need to change. But just because they're thinking, but there doesn't mean that they're going to make a big change. This contemplation phase is seen with a lot of ambivalence, to leave or not to leave. They keep moving in that uh, phase. Then at a point they will prepare and determine, and at one point of time they may take some action also, in which they are able to leave. But it doesn't mean that once you have left, life is all success, victorious life. The uh, the most important feature of addiction is that there will be a fall, there will be a lapse, and uh, ideally that lapse should not progress into a relapse, which is like completely going back to the old pattern of use of the substance or the behavior. So yes, there has been a fall, but a person has to get back and go into contemplation and go through these phases again. Something like Christian life, like just because you sin, you can go back into complete backslidden stage, but just because you fall doesn't mean that it's all over. You should determine, confess, and again get back to your life. So uh, life of an addict is quite like normal Christian life. Like, yeah, mistakes happen, but yes, then you get back again. Anticipate challenges. So when people want to leave their behaviors or leave substances, they're going to go through withdrawal. It's biological. There's no uh, uh, option. So if I were to take an anesthetic agent, I will lose my consciousness, because that's the way it was made. I am living in flesh, so there will be change. Similarly, when a person who's addicted, if is not getting it, he will go through withdrawal. That is natural. So we have to help them, and probably with medications if necessary. So remember that withdrawal and craving are likely to be there, and we may need to help them. Peer pressure. So if you have to help them uh, using counseling, you have to counsel them to help handle the peer pressure, handle stress, interpersonal stress, intrapersonal stress, and how to handle this negative emotional states. So these things need to be taught. So pharmacologically manage by giving appropriate medications for treating withdrawal. Each drug will, each substance will have its own withdrawal features. I'm not going to go into details of which drug will be needed for what. So medications are there for withdrawal. There are medications for reducing craving. Some, like for alcohol, you have deterrent therapy with diazepam. So use appropriately. Non-pharmacologically important, that as I said, lapse can happen, but you should prevent relapse. How to manage the cues when they're tempted, when they are in a situation where those memories are coming, how to manage that. How to manage their free time, like in the Bible, if one devil is gone, means if it is uh, the room's empty, 9 more will come. So something like that. If you remove one addiction from your life, you have a lot of empty space in that life. Other bad things can come in. You need to substitute with good behaviors. So the way to remove bad behaviors is actually to substitute with good behaviors. How to manage stress. There are people may develop dysfunctional thinking pattern, for which cognitive behavioral therapy can help. Also group therapy. I found this recently. I saw one boy whom I knew as a small kid, but now using substances. So he started going to group therapy. He said of all therapy sessions, he likes group therapy because he can connect with those other drug users. He can't connect with these therapists and all who've never gone into that line, but he connects with ex users, and therefore he finds the most benefit there. So so take home points for all of us: if we don't take any substances, or uh, not unduly involved in any kind of behavior which can be addictive, uh, don't go into it. Don't experiment much. If you do take, please reduce. If you are unable, that means you are on path for addiction, so we should seek help. So remember that starting the use is a choice, but addiction is not a choice; it's a disease. So don't blame yourself, don't blame your friends. Don't judge them when they're in that state, because they are not having choice anymore. Yeah, we are having free will. The concept of free will makes us believe that even in an addicted state, we do have choice. Yes, in addicted state, there's a choice to want to change, but not the choice to change uh, the because the change may not even come, but wanting to change is a choice. So wanting to take therapy is a choice. I do agree. uh, so also remember that what has been, all these substances that are there for millennia. God only created tobacco plant. God only created coca plant, or poppy plant. So there are some medical uses for these, and the abuse of which is the problem. And therefore what has been there, we just cannot expect it to be we cannot expect it to disappear. And therefore we need to learn to manage with addiction is not going to go away, so we need to learn how to manage. So with that, I stop. uh, I will take questions in the end after Valerie ma'am's presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Dheeraj, for sharing the facts and the information about addiction. Thank you for sharing the lots of statistics showing that the most addictive one is nicotine and the most harmful one is alcohol, and also the killer is the tobacco. Also, sharing about the addiction cycle and the stages of change model, where saying that relapse is so common to come back. If there's a relapse, come back and again start the cycle again. And of course, choosing the substance is our choice, but not addiction. So to tell us that we can seek help after addiction. So thank you very much for sharing. I just want to remind you, if you guys have a question, you can write on the chat or inbox me or Joshua. Without wasting any more time, we're going to go to our next speaker. I present you Dr. Valerie Jaques. Dr. Valerie is a psychologist working for Integrated Psychology Network, which is based in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Thank you, Dr. Valerie, for taking the time out to address the young medical and dental professionals of South Asia. So I want to hand over the floor to you.
Thank you, Christine. And thank you for inviting me to this forum to share on this topic of understanding the complexities of addiction. It is a huge topic to speak about in this short time, and Dr. Dheeraj has spoken so much and shared so much in this short time. My perspective on addiction is slightly different, as it has to do with individual development of the human person that has the ability to face all challenges in life if they have a baseline filled with loving and supportive environment and a relationship with the people in their lives, and especially with God. So addiction to me begins as this baseline is lacking, and the environment that the individual grows up in is often toxic. So let's begin with defining addiction from this perspective. Okay. Slide. Okay. So addiction then can be seen as I need to move your videos away. Okay. All right. So addiction then is defined as an observable behavior of not having control over something to the point where it becomes harmful to you. Notice I'm not using WHO definition, okay? I'm just using layman terms to say that very often that person cannot control themselves, and to the point that they begin to harm themselves. So I think Dr. Dheeraj said that it doesn't mean they like it. It's not bringing pleasure, but it becomes harmful and they have no control at this point in time. So examples of this kind of observable behavior is in action words such as doing things. So we do games, some people do porn, they do things to stimulate themselves. When I talk about stimulation, it can even be people with eating disorders who eat, binge eat, and then throw up. You know, all of these are creating different kinds of sensations. And this becomes so habitual that they find it difficult to stop or to change. Then there are people who are taking in food and substances, and therefore taking in, meaning ingesting. And then there are those who are using things. So doing things, taking things, using things, and using things like words, thoughts, actions, objects for harm on themselves or even on others. So sometimes in the space where people become out of control in that sense, all of these seem to be tied in with addiction. So I'm looking at it from perspective of behaviors that we can observe, and where do these behaviors come from? What's hiding inside the person or behind all of these? So most of the time, these actions are driven or motivated to satisfy some deep longing, some deep hunger or thirst, pain, discomfort, emptiness, helplessness deep within themselves. You know, we often think that deep within ourselves is the place of peace and love and joy. But for many people, deep within themselves is such a degree of pain. So if I asked you to imagine and enter into the world of this addict, this person who's having so much of difficulty, deep within them is this pain. And what we see on the outside, we don't see pain, but we see behavior. So in my world, it is about learning to go beyond that behavior into the depths of the person, because that's where we begin to understand. Now, what are some causes? Let's look at some of these root causes of addiction. And I'd like to say that the main focus around addiction is trauma. And if you think of trauma, sometimes we say it's like a dent. Somebody's punched you and you got a dent in there. That's the traumatic wound over there. For some, you can imagine as if a knife came and stabbed you in the back when someone betrayed you. And even more painful when they twisted that knife inside you and made you feel that pain. So imagine then when a person experiences trauma, especially when they are young, children, growing up. Very often what happens, whether it's implicitly happening or explicitly happening, what happens to the person is very much depicted in this picture. Something shatters, and you can begin to see in this picture the shattering, the portion that connects, the portion of the brain that connects our central processing unit, our brain, from the rest of our body. When that portion in our world shatters, and it's not necessarily physically shattering, it can be symbolically shattering, happens. The person then begins to experience many different things. If we're looking at the squiggly lines in the top of the head here in the frontal portion, you'd think of confusion. The person is in a mess. My life is in a mess. You begin to see in this image here a tear falling down, and that depicts emotions of sadness. So when you think of this individual who's experienced trauma, it can come in the form of grief and loss. It can come in the form of abandonment, rejection, physical harm, sexual abuse, inappropriate touch modeled behavior, or feeling good with substances, enjoyment through games, etc., etc. So if I take stories of people who experience things like this in terms of trauma in their lives, I have not met a single addict out there, if I worked with those in a drug rehabilitation center, or if I've worked with drug users or alcohol addicts, or people who come in and say they're gaming addicts. I've worked with sex addicts. And if you look at all of these people who come in, there isn't a single one that I have encountered in my life who came coming from a background without trauma. Every single one of them has experienced a lot of trauma growing up from the time they were young children into adolescence and into young adulthood. And therefore, they formed these kinds of coping mechanisms and these behaviors. So any trauma that a person experiences will throw this person into some form of a survival mode. Now, we begin, or rather the person begins to feel this confusion, bad feelings, sadness, conflict, pain, anger, shame, and guilt. A lot of emotions. Now, there was a study done on adverse childhood experiences, which showed high correlation with addiction. So what is this ACE study about? Let's move and look at it. So the word ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. Many people who were either coming from prison, who had, and even people who have centers, were asked to take these questions, fill out this questionnaire tied to adverse childhood experiences. And so what is adverse childhood experience? ACEs. So ACEs are traumatic events that occurred in childhood between 0 to 17 years old. So a number of incidents or events were put out and people were asked to rate them. ACEs are also linked to chronic health problems. So people who had adverse childhood experiences, they found correlation with health problems, mental substance use, addiction in adolescence and adulthood. ACEs also can negatively impact relationships. And when we talk of relationship, we talk of, but it means that people bond with one another or form relationships with people who continue to keep the abuse in their lives going. So if they've had negative relationships or feeling bad in their lives, they tend to form relationships where their partner tends to continue to keep them feeling bad, or intimate partner violence happens in such relationships. So you might find codependent relationships happening. These are all tied in with adverse childhood experiences. It can impact education, job opportunities, and earning potential as well. Now, there is also a high relationship between addiction and these examples here. So you can see abuse, physical abuse, emotional, sexual abuse. And people who came from backgrounds that had abuse like this tend to use some form of addiction behavior to soothe that and cope with the pain of this abuse that they experience. There are those with neglect, those, when we talk about physical neglect, this is where children grow up without parents, and they keep moving from one to another. Emotional neglect, this is where we say you have parents who you can see that they are there, but there is no emotional support coming from parents. And children, especially today's children, a lot of people tend to be living very isolated, quietly by themselves, and they don't speak very much. And this is why the gaming industry is very good for them, because they then begin to form relationships. And we begin to see how those relationships can influence their lives and the strategies that they take to cope with this kind of pain. There are also household dysfunctions. If you grow up in a house where a family member suffers a mental illness or even a mental disability, you may have a mother who is domestic violence, a mother who is treated violently, parents are constantly arguing and in conflict, leading to divorce. All of these impact children, and it brings a lot of pain in their lives. Sometimes you have a family member who's in prison. There's other people in the family with substance abuse as well. So these are some examples of ACEs. Now, what are some effects of ACEs? You'd find lack of physical activity. So your couch potatoes, you find people saying, you're so lazy, you're just sitting around doing nothing and smoking or drinking or, taking drugs, just trying to numb some kind of feelings out there. People who miss work, can't keep up with their classes. These are all beginning signs that something is not right. You get physical and mental health issues. One of the signs is identity, form, image, body image, in terms of obesity issues, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, sexually transmitted diseases, heart problems, cancer, stroke, all stress related. You can see COPD, broken bones, all these stress related. And eventually, when we think behind it, what is it that brought on such problems in a person's life? And if we adverse childhood experiences that brought on multiple forms of trauma in their life. And so when we begin to understand the correlation between trauma and addiction, then we begin how sad it is to hear the kind of difficult situations that these people went through. Now, I want to bring you into not just addiction and trauma, but how it says not stable. Can you hear me? Okay. But how, now you see this picture of the iceberg, and above the iceberg, the part that we can see is very often the observed behavior of the addict. And this is only the small portion. But as I said, in my line of work, we don't just look at the external signs to treat. We go dig deep underground to see what's hiding within. And very often, what's hiding within from a lot of those past background history, adverse childhood experiences would be the emotion called shame. The emotion called shame, which comes with a lot of pain, a lot of emptiness, a lot of loneliness, and a lot of discomfort. So let's look now at what really is shame. And I like this definition of shame, which to me is a deep internal wound that bleeds us and leaves us with pain. So this man, this psychologist called Gershon Kaufman, he wrote this book and he defines shame in this way. It's from a psychodynamic point of view, and he says, shame itself is an entrance to the self. It is the effect of indignity, of defeat or transgression, of inferiority and of alienation. No other affect is closer to the experienced self. None is more central to the sense of identity. Shame is felt as an inner torment, a sickness of the soul. It is the most poignant experience of the self by the self, whether felt in the humiliation of cowardice or in the sense of failure to cope successfully with a challenge. Shame is a wound felt from the inside, dividing us both from ourselves and from one another. This is quite a powerful, strong feeling of shame from deep within oneself. So if you begin to see this person, this wounded person who comes in the form of an addict in front of us, and if we look behind them and enter into the self of that person and begin to see the kind of pain that they feel from within, sometimes it's quite sad and it's difficult to decide how to bring healing in this place. Now, another theorist who talks about shame is a man called Sylvan Tompkins. And he came up with a theory called the affect theory, in which he talks about one of the affects called shame humiliation as an affect that happens when positive emotions of interest, excitement, or enjoyment, joy are interrupted, causing a cognitive shock, blush, loss of muscle tone to the neck and shoulders, resulting in a lowered gaze, unable to think. And this is what you'll find with the addict. They often can't look you in the eye much. They're not sure what to say. They try to say something, but it's like there's a block, you know? And sometimes we say brain freeze, that you went into this kind of a mode and can't make connections in terms of trying to make conversation even. Now, shame, as with all emotion, will pass. So you feel shame for a moment, next minute it's gone and you can move on to something else. You feel fear for a moment and then there's nothing to be afraid of and we move on. So these are emotions, they come and they go, they're tied to these affects. However, when we experience implicit and explicit forms of abuse that are continuously happening, as shown in the ACE studies, then shame becomes a trait. It no longer is an emotion that comes and goes. It stays and it becomes a trait. Similarly, fear stays and becomes a trait. And then when you look at a person, you say, oh, this person is such a fearful person. They're always scared of everything. Oh, this person is shameless, or this person is always putting themselves down. Why do they do that? It becomes part of their personality. And this then motivates them to form strategies to cope with that pain. And these strategies may be maladaptive strategies, often observed in addictive behavior, where they start to break down. And they do things either because they feel ashamed and therefore they hide and do something, or they're shameless and they just go out and do things in front of people. Okay, so these are some of the inner things that are happening in a person. Now, when we think of shame from a cognitive perspective, in the world of the cognitive, we call shame one of the self-conscious emotions. There are 4 self-conscious emotions. It's shame, guilt, pride, and embarrassment. And these are all elicited when cognitive processes are triggered by antecedent subjective experiences. So something triggers it, this emotion comes, and then behavior comes from there. So let's look first at shame and guilt, because these are 2 emotions very much tied in the addict. Both these emotions are negative evaluations. Shame is a negative evaluation directed at the self, while guilt is the negative evaluation directed at my behavior. So it's either I feel I am bad as a person versus my behavior is bad. Now, I think when we are older, like all of you are older, you can now think for yourself and say, is it my behavior bad? Did I do something wrong? Or am I a bad person? You can tell the difference. But when you're a child growing up and you experience hurts, pains, wounds from people around you, children don't know how to tell the difference between themselves being bad or their behavior being bad. They only know that they had a bad feeling. And if this was not helped to heal or to process and to move on, they continue to think of themselves as bad people. And when you think of yourself as a bad person, after some time, you want to die. And so to not die, you cope by finding some other way to numb, to push something away. And this is where addictive behaviors now start to get formed, where they will try something that will help to take that bad feeling away. And eventually then, they need more and more of the same because it still keeps coming back. Okay, and so that's the bad feeling, the negative evaluation. But if we look now at shame and pride, pride is a positive feeling. So we're talking about positive evaluation. Now, there are 2 types of pride. It's an authentic pride and a hubristic pride. So can you guess which one is the addict? The authentic pride or the hubristic pride? I'm sure you can tell. It's the hubristic pride. So it's tied to the sense of accomplishment. Now, both forms of pride are positive evaluations, not like shame and guilt, which were negative evaluations. So this positive evaluation, if it is authentic, it's directed at the behavior that I did. So it's like saying, hey, I passed my exam because I worked hard, I studied hard, and I was able to see the fruit of my labor. But people with an inflated pride or a hubristic pride, for them, their positive evaluation is always directed to the self. And the self is always thinking that they are great, they are good, nothing is wrong with them. And these are the people who often have problems where they point the fingers out and say something is wrong with somebody else and not with me. Now, this is a problem in addiction because there are many people who don't admit that they have a problem. And that is the starting point where they are covering up their pain. And this is where hubristic pride is tied in with shame at a deep unconscious level. So they don't feel shame, they feel a false pride, an inflated pride. Okay, and so you will find many people in the world of addiction who will never admit that they have a problem. They will always say, yeah, I drink, but I'm not an addict. I'm okay. Yeah, I do dabble in some drugs here and there, but I'm okay. I can still manage my life. So these are sometimes the problems that come about. So with this, we come back to, again, more definition, where shame has been described as an extremely painful feeling stemming from a negative evaluation of the self that impacts interpersonal behavior. So imagine if you can experience such negative evaluation and find ways to try and get away from feeling so bad in life. Another definition on shame is where it leaves the individual feeling exposed and is accompanied by worthlessness, fear of abandonment, sense of being small, which makes it an acutely painful emotion. Now, if I told you a little bit of a story using some of these feelings, I once had a lady who came, and her whole family used to be so angry with her because they said she's drinking all the time. But for many years of her life, she was actually okay. And there was social drinking, but it was not to the point where something was wrong that she couldn't get off the bottle. And she went to Alcoholics Anonymous, she went to psychiatrists, she was on medication, she tried so many things. But nobody really stopped to listen to her story. So in the course of asking her, I asked her how she evaluates herself. I asked her things about what are these painful feelings, what has happened in her life that pushed her drinking to such a level. And this lady was grieving. She had a brother who had committed suicide. And then not long after, her mother died. And she was living with her husband in another country, in an Asian country. And she came from another country. And she had no means to visit them, see them, work through the grief, that within a short period of time that she was supposed to turn around, pick herself up and continue life. But she just couldn't. And the only thing that helped numb those, and on medication, she couldn't numb the alcohol. It was the alcohol that helped her numb herself even more to be able to maintain and put a face on to face the family every day. And the next evaluation that she kept getting from the people around her was not positive at all. Until we spend some time listening and acknowledging her pain and getting her to talk about the difficulty of the losses that she had in her life. And you know, this lady eventually, when she realized that where the pain was, that was tied to the grief and loss, and when she was able to work that grief and loss out in her life, she turned around and she no longer needed alcohol in her life. So these are stories of hope that says we can turn around and we can heal, but we must acknowledge that hiding behind this behavior is a lot of pain, and pain of shame, pain of and hurt in there. Okay, so I hope this helps you to see the correlation that I was trying to show between addiction with the external signs and shame that are the internal signs. What is it that we need to do now to heal these addictions? We've got all these addictions. Talking about them and giving you more stories on them, sure, I can do that. But what do we do with it? How to heal? How to help people who are needing this kind of healing? And the answer to this is relationship. Now, our human reality is that we are born in a world to be in relationship. Right from conception, the child in the womb is in a relationship with mother, then with father. And in this period of time, there is nature, our DNA, our genetics. We are in relationship with what has been handed down naturally in the biological. And then we are born into a world and we begin to connect with the influences of the environment. And this environment then nurtures our development that either fills us with love and stability or with negative emotional experiences that keep us in survival mode, feeling that anger, that fear, that shame, sadness, all that create mind-body disconnection, resulting in maladaptive strategies and coping, like addiction. So what kind of relationship will help bring healing? And this is where we begin to talk about our relationship with God and the promise that we are made in the image and likeness that guides us towards healthy, loving relationships that grows the human person into wholeness from emptiness. So if we think of this concept of God that helps to grow us from wholeness into wholeness, from emptiness into wholeness. Let's look at these diagrams. So imagine this is an addict, an empty eye, and then the addict calls out, God, help me, I am an addict. It can only help when we recognize that we need help and we call for help. And this now begins a relationship. As the relationship grows, you can begin to see that the I is no longer so empty. There is an overlap that is coming in the relationship. And eventually, a new life transformed. And this is healing for anyone, any form of addiction. It is potentially possible. Now, what is it that we need to do? So when we talk about coming to oneness in this place, we talk about Jesus comes to heal us from all our addictions. Now, all of us have suffering and we have potentials, and Jesus comes into our life. So to me, as a psychologist and therapist who is Christian, I believe we are called to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, who showed us the way to form these relationships that can help heal human beings. Addict. This brings us a sign of hope. So each of us in your role as doctors, as student leaders, need to embrace the nature of Jesus to help those around who have fallen into the toxic space of addiction. They need unconditional love, compassion, tough love, patience, gentleness, kindness, and a great deal of hope trust and prayer. And I think this is what the model of Jesus as a person showed us how to reach out to help those who are in need of help. And I think we are all in a helping profession. Now, some of you yourselves as students may be suffering from some difficulty situations. And working with someone, whether in individual forms of therapy, whether in group therapy, or whether you are talking to a friend, a fellow colleague, someone who will listen to you and listen to you with this unconditional acceptance, trying to understand where is the depth of your pain coming from. And when we can listen to it and acknowledge it and allow it to be expressed, it finds a healing. And in that healing space come transformation. And so I hope that all of you here will be able to understand some of this and perhaps put this into practice when you meet with people who suffer from various forms of addiction. So I'll pause, I'll stop here. Thank you very much. And we can take questions. I noticed a question. Are you ready with the question? I noticed a question from a participant who's talking about the role in helping a friend who is addicted to pornography. And he knows it is wrong, but finds it difficult to stop. Shall I answer this question a little bit?
I think before we go to the Q&A session, I would first like to thank you, Dr. Valerie, for going with us through the psychology of addiction and explaining to us how trauma and adverse childhood effects damage almost every aspect of our being, and increases the sympathetic discharge, putting us into survival mode or the fight and the flight mode, and how addiction is sort of a coping mechanism to that, and how relationships are basically the cause and also the cure. Adverse relationships lead you towards addiction, and good relationships bring you out of those addictions. And also how you emphasize that the iceberg model of how much we actually do not see, do not appreciate what's going inside a person that leads them to addiction. And of course, how you went through what shame is and how it leads to decreased self-esteem, apathy, fear, which damages our interpersonal relationships and leads towards being to feeling worthlessness, and how the actual relationship that matters for the cure is our relationship with God, because as humans, we change, our interactions with different people change. Sometimes you are expecting a different type of response and often get a completely out of the blue kind of response, which often damages us. But God, as immutable he is, immutability being one of his attributes, stays the same, and we can always rely on him as the sole relationship that we need to fix our addiction. I thank you for all the insights that we have shared on behalf of ICMDA and the whole South Asian group. And with that, we'd like to go towards Q&A, and I would request participants to kindly share their questions in the chat, or if they feel uncomfortable, they can either message me or Dr. Christine, and we'll share your questions with the speakers. Thank you.
Valerie, ma'am, you wanted to answer one question. You can take that question first.
Yes, so shall I answer the question? There's a question here about from the participant that says, what is my role to help a friend who is addicted to pornography? He knows it is wrong, but he finds it difficult to stop. I think that is tied in with aspects of masturbation and self-stimulation. All of these are issues tied to low positive emotions in a person. It means that when the inner motive or the inner self is feeling very low, say for example, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you say 10 is I'm feeling great in my life, very often a person who tends to get stuck on pornography to keep getting this high up feeling is actually feeling a 1 and a 2, very, very low. And they tend to go, the fastest form of stimulation to make me feel a bit up and a bit better is sexual stimulation. It's faster than drugs, it's faster than alcohol or even gaming. And it just tells the degree of how low that person is feeling within themselves. So very often this has become their own strategy to keep themselves up, So I think all of you medical doctors know that when you do ECG, your ECG is showing up and down, but when it's coming to almost a flat line, you're going to die, right? And people who tend to go into self-stimulation, they're beginning to feel at an emotional level that they are going onto a flat line and they need to do something to joke. But socially, many people will judge this as very negative behavior and that this is wrong or this is sinful behavior. So the way in which we help persons to understand is not to go into the social behavior, but more to begin to understand what is the low positive emotion that is going on within them. What is it that's difficult in their life that makes them have low energy and low motive. And when we can understand this and they're able to articulate this, they start to feel better. And that when you notice they're doing things to take care of themselves, to treat themselves well, and they have good, accepting, understanding relationships around, you will find that they no longer feel drawn to this kind of behavior. But to do it first, they need to go into that space where they can face and talk to someone about that place, that difficulty that they feel, and to acknowledge what is it like to feel so low. And when they can do that gauge of their 1 to 10, for example, they know what they need to do. When is the emotion dipping? At which point must I stop to be able to help myself to find rest, take care of myself and not keep pushing, because as I keep pushing with little energy, I'm actually dipping in my positive emotion. Okay, so I hope that's quite clear. That's how we help a person to be able to understand. We don't have to make them feel more guilty. They're already guilty enough. They already feel bad enough. So we just help them understand in relation to level of emotion. Is it positive emotion or is it low positive emotion or negative emotions? And when we can shift them into a place where they start to love themselves, take care of themselves, treat themselves with care, you'll find that this shift can happen.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sorry, Dr. Christine. I think we have one more question. So someone would like to know that what are the challenges that you face in patients dealing with addiction to pornography, and any success stories you might want to share, and how do a person go about it in dealing with addiction to porn?
Yeah, so I think that's what I was talking. Okay, if you want to hear a case in relation to issues of pornography, actually this happens to many young teenagers between ages 13, 14, 15. It already begins at this stage. And if they didn't get help, then this becomes habitual behavior that keeps them on a high. So if I give you an example of a university student, 20 years old right now, and who who tells me that it's very difficult to go to sleep in the night if he didn't watch some porn and if he didn't masturbate and all of this. And exactly what I said just now, I talked to him about, or I asked him questions about what does he feel at which point is the low positive emotion or low negative emotions come, or high negative emotions. And when was it that he felt better in his life? What was it like? And he can talk about positive experiences in his life. Then he can make comparisons. And he began to see that he is on a moving scale. That when he's rested and good time with friends, he's able to do some exercise in his life, jogging, he has achieved something, he tends to be in a better place, and therefore he's not feeling the strong urge to go to pornography. But the minute he's feeling low in his life and he's tired, especially at the end of the day, this is when he feels drawn to it, and then this is how he finds healing from it. So what we learn to do is to be able to take breaks in the earlier part of the day. So say if he was feeling generally an 8 and he was okay in his beginning part of his day, and he noticed by afternoon 2 o'clock, he was dipping down and he was already like a 4 going to a 3, then he would learn that he needs to stop and not do something, get some rest, treat himself well, go and do some different activity because maybe studying was just too stressful at that point in time. He needed to go for a run, do something different. And this then made his energy pick up. And then he would go from a 4, he'd go back up to a 6. Then by the time he went to sleep in the night, if he was at a 5 and a 6, he didn't need the porn. He could consciously tell himself, I'm okay, and then he would not do it. But if he dipped below a 3 to a 2, his brain wasn't thinking anymore. He just needed to stimulate, and then he would just go to it. Okay, so these are just these kinds of cases. They start depending again on the experiences in the back. Now, why does he have so little energy and low emotions? Again, adverse childhood experiences going back to his life. He grew up in a house where there was constant conflict between father and mother. Mother was in an oppressive environment, having to, hold her words in with a very dominant mother-in-law. And it's a very strong family dynamic. And there were no outlets and there were frustrations. And the boy was growing up in the midst of parents who had frustrations. They may not have put it out on him, but the conflict that was around there made him feel very uncomfortable. He didn't know what to do. And he was always having to try and please and make people happy, and himself was very unhappy. So if we go way back into their life, then this was already seen in that way. And it was already seen when he was in school before he went away to uni, that he struggled a lot with his studies and putting out that energy. And nobody helped him at that point to regulate or to understand. It was all externalized advice saying, do like this, so don't do that, be like this, or be like that. Understand it himself and to regulate it in himself. So only now when he's come at 20 years old and he's talking about it, he has to change a behavior that's been going on for many, many, many years, a coping mechanism. But he's managed it. And he can actually tell me, I went without doing this for more than a week or 2 weeks. And how am I managing? How am I regulating? And over time, the behavior becomes lesser and lesser. He doesn't need to go there because he's not dipping within himself at an emotional level. Okay, did I answer the question?
Yes, ma'am. Just to clear one thing. So what if this particular action, watching porn and self-stimulation is not associated with negative emotion? I mean, in the past, it might have that association, but like, for example, a person comes to you now and says, for example, if I were to be a patient and I say to you, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not feeling down, but maybe just after we quit this webinar, I might go and do stuff. So how
would you
Okay.
treat these patients who say
Okay.
that
This.
there's nothing
Mm,
negative associated with me doing this activity, but it's just that I don't have anything else to do, and maybe it's just I am just watching it for the sake of watching it, doing stuff just for the sake of doing stuff. So
okay. Just said is what I defined as shame in the unconscious realm. Okay, shame in the unconscious realm. So a person does not recognize that there's something bad that has happened in their lives, but the fact that you said, I feel bored, and so I'm doing this to feel some not so bored feeling, that in itself is a sign that there is some problem hiding behind it. Except that the awareness level of the individual is not at the awareness level of what are the things that have brought me to a place that says I'm bored. And this is a problem of the generation, today's generation, where that bored feeling comes in very quickly, no matter what. So it may not be pornography, it might be playing games, online games. And when they stop, there's that withdrawal, and I feel bored. Yeah, and this has got to do a lot with being highly stimulated from a very young age. So children who are left in front of gadgets and TV and constantly, that is the source of their, they eat in front of the gadgets, they literally live in front of stimulating things, then they have never learned to be without something. So the minute you leave them quiet for a while, then this boredom sets in. This is tied in with what I call the hubristic pride, where they don't think there's anything wrong because I am good, everything is good about me, and they're not able to see that this is something wrong in me, this is something bad going on in me, because it's making me feel right. I've done it all the while, nothing has hurt me, and this is the kind of thinking in the background. Okay, so that's the person with the hubristic pride, whereas the earlier case I gave you is the person with shame, where they are self-conscious about something, they know it and they feel it. And then the case that you're giving is the case of the person who is not aware of it. So it's so deeply ingrained. And more often than not, the people who experience this hubristic pride, the wounding has happened in very early childhood, before 6 years old. And that's why they don't realize, they don't know that something is not right in me, because maybe they've gotten a lot of positive validation around them that it's okay, they didn't need to do anything, and they were always the best and the good. And so the sense of reality within is not always there. Okay, so there's a difference between a person with some degree of an insight, they can tell something is not right, versus someone who does not have that insight, and therefore they can't tell, and they think it's all okay. Have the insight, because they won't admit they have a problem, and they won't say that I need any help. This is the difference. Okay, but I think when they come into such sessions like this, and there's some education and understanding around something, maybe it gets them to start thinking. Okay, so that might be helpful.
thank you very much, ma'am. Over to Dr. Kristen. Thank you.
Dr. Dheeraj might have 2 questions to answer.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. One is, how do we resist from the relapse stage of change model? Or so, for example, if a person is trying so hard to get out of addiction, but an incident or trauma causes relapse, how do we prevent us from going back to addiction? So basically, a relapse is happening after a lapse, and a lapse is happening after the person faced a risk situation and failed to do things that he was supposed to do, and therefore lapse has happened. Now after lapse has happened, he still has some choices. He has to there are certain things to be done. If he doesn't do, it will go into a full-blown relapse. So what are the things that are expected to be done when a person is abstinent? He's in a maintenance phase, he's not lapsed yet. Is that he should learn to recognize high risk situations. What are the cues? What are the time cues? What are the environmental cues? What are the kind of peers? What are the emotional states he is in before he had actually been using those substances or those behaviors? He should learn to recognize high risk situation. Once he recognizes high risk situation, he should develop certain coping skills to deal with that particular situation. It could be to take a step back and pray, or take a step back and call up a friend, or uh, 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 do some people may maybe meditate or look at a Bible verse, or look at a card which actually tells the benefits of continuing in his abstinent state, and look at the harms that would happen if he were to lapse and relapse. So these things would again increase his motivation to not going to the act of lapsing. But in case once you lapse, uh, there's something called abstinence violation effect which comes. Array, I thought I will not drink at all. I now drank 60 ml. Let me as well drink today fully, and drink my usual quota of 180 ml. So this kind of abstinence violation effect will come into play, and so then this will lead to more guilt, and because of negative effect, again use of the substance, and will go into complete relapse. So the lessons are: one, learn to deal with high risk situation. Learn the skills that are required to be for you to do when you are in a high risk situation, so that you don't lapse. And when you lapse, you should know to get back to help. I should not think this abstinence violation effect should not kick in. So you should know that just because this thing has happened, for a Christian who actually falls into sin, there's a difference between falling into sin and actually living in sin. Like I hear this, a sheep, if it falls into a ditch, I mean, roadside drain of which is carrying sewage and all that. If a sheep were to fall into it, what would happen? Would it stay there forever? No, it would get out and try to get clean. But if a pig will enjoy there nicely. So there's a difference between wanting to live in sin and actually a person who doesn't want to live in sin, who falls into sin. There's a difference. So similarly, a person who's lapsing is a person who is supposed to come out of it. He's not a person who is completely in pre-contemplation phase, doesn't want to change. He's already like the other who's enjoying it. Okay, so you get the point. So this is the crux of relapse prevention. Also, there's another question which says, how can I help move a person from wanting to change to determined to change? So basically, how do you move a person? The person who's not even thinking about changing, how would you want him to change? Now, approaching very directly, you will get into conflicts. Many times we Christians do that, and that's why people think, okay, we are very judgmental people. I don't have a problem. That fellow is coming telling me that I am having sin, I am having this thing, this is sin, it seems. What is this? This fellows, they think that holy Jews. That kind of impression they'll have. They don't even see a problem. Why are we creating the problem for him? So we should not approach the problem directly. We should do something called what I'm going to tell. I'm going to tell 5 things, and I'll tell you an anagram to remember it. First one is called developing discrepancy. Tell him where he is now and where he wants to be, and let him work out what he's doing. Is it going to hinder where he wants to be or not? Right. So many times when you've done that, that itself starts this process of, oh, I need to make changes to get where I want to be. So that is developing discrepancy. Second thing is avoiding arguments. If you argue, the person will dig his heels down and want to not change. Rather than that, don't avoid argument. Do the third thing, what you're supposed to do, roll with resistance. There will be resistance. Just go with it. Doesn't matter. Okay. But keep your relationship alive. The next thing is expressing empathy. Sometimes we miss the fact, are we completely sinless or something? No, even if you're not having this outrightly sinful lifestyles, we may struggle with doubt, we may struggle with bitterness, or not forgiving, or pride, or these things. So we have to understand that none of us is perfect. So it is always possible for us to empathize with a person who is stuck in some problem. So we should humbly understand that they are having this problem, and we should express that fact that they are there for certain reasons. There are so many risk factors that they have gone through, that they have made some attempts, but still they are still stuck. So we should appreciate their attempts. And lastly, supporting their self-efficacy. They are having some capacity to change, right? God has given some level of control in us, so we have to support that self-efficacy. They can do it with help and treatment, and other, with the help of everybody else and including themselves. They can make a change. Should support their self-efficacy. So to remember this, it's called DARES, DARES: developing discrepancy, avoiding arguments, rolling with resistance, expressing empathy, and supporting self-efficacy. Uh, so when we do this, the person is likely to move from one stage to a stage in which they will determine that I will make a change. Uh, Maybe I'll tell a small story. Ma'am has told some stories, so I think stories will stick to our mind. About a year ago, I got a patient who said he was a solid gamer. He was playing 18 to 20 hours a day, and his BMI was 13. Just was lean, like he wouldn't eat food. He will be gaming. He won't eat food at all. He was so bad that we had to send him to eating clinic, to prevent refeeding syndrome, which actually is having high mortality. So a person like him, he came for psychiatric help, and he said, uh, "Don't talk about gaming. Don't talk about my future." If you don't talk about gaming, don't talk about future, what is left to talk? That's what we will think. But he stayed for about a month and a half. By the time he was going, he reduced his gaming from those 18 hours and all to half an hour per day. And the one who thought that he will not go for any not to discuss any future, he said he started liking photography. And in the past year, he has done a still photography course. And last month he joined a visual communication graduate's degree. And all that happened with the kind of therapy that he received, in which we were not directly approaching the problem at all. We were talking about life, talking about what things he likes, what he liked in his childhood. And he worked out other things by himself. He still games 1 hour per week on Saturday, he does, but rest of the time he's spending time with his family and is doing a great job. So directly approaching, thinking that you have to save this person from his sin of he's caught in this mess, rather than that, what you should have is, I should love my neighbor, I should care for him, I should help him achieve his goals. That should be the way we should look at our friends. I think I got these questions. I don't know if I got any more.
I got one question. Anyway, I like what you said. Your dad is very nice. But basically what you're saying, that the person will be able to manage themselves and map themselves. And it's interesting when people lapse and relapse. We must not be doing this on our own. Everything we do, we must have support. And the addict is the first one to lapse or to relapse. When they start to feel a little better, immediately then they'll say, okay, I can carry on, I don't need this. And then they will pull away from the source of that support, and then they lapse. But the key is that whether you feel right, whether you feel good, whether you're better, You must still continue with the support or the therapy or the whatever that is continuing until your tank fills up to a point where you are strong. Many people begin substance consumption as a mode of networking with peers. Now it's almost impossible to network or socialize, and will do not, and those who do not are often seen as socially withdrawing themselves. How do we approach this social and environmental dynamic? This is a good question. Your question is talking about all or nothing. It means I am either all in and social and I have to drink and I have to do all of this, which means that you're saying you have no sense of self. You have no sense of an inner self concept that has the right to say yes and no. And the other alternative you're saying is, if I do have and I don't want this, it means I'm completely out. And where do we draw the line? Now, the people who end up in addiction are not the people who just went in and tried or did something, who have a strong sense of a self-concept, a self-image, and self-esteem. People who come from very stable environments, they also go and test and try things. I'm sure many of you have tested and tried things too in your life, and then made a decision from there whether you like it or you don't. You want to join it or you don't want to join it. The people who fall and keep continuing are people who do not have a strong self on the inside. And then they make excuses and they're not able to draw those boundary lines. So in situations where you say, in my work, I need to network, I need to socialize, I need to go out, everybody has a limit. And it means if you know where your limit is, and you know where you draw the line, then you would do something in relation to that line and not cross it too much, and not allow people to pull and push your strings. The minute you have people pushing you and pulling you and saying you have to do it this way and this way, it means that you do not have an inner anchor that decides for yourself how much and how far. We can all accommodate to some degree, but to some degree, you are the master of your life that decides when is yes and when is no. So this is a challenge, especially when you're young. And if you have older people around you and that say, no, this is part of work, this is how we work, this is what we do, and that you're just supposed to follow, then you need to ask yourself, is this environment, who are the people in the environment who do it, and who are the people who don't do it? Because if you're working in a place, you'd find there are some people who don't do that. Some people who may socialize, but they drink tea and coffee. And some people who will socialize, but after one drink, they will say, okay, that's it for tonight, and I'm going home. And finding that right balance. So again, based on this question, I'd say it's a sign then that the person does not have a strong inner self-concept, self-image, and an inner anchor. Your locus of control is not from within, it's coming from outside. If you say that no choice, I have to follow other people. Everybody has a choice. It's a matter of, do you let people pull you and push you, or do you have a say in your life? Now, when you're children, you don't have a say. Your parents will say, come and go. And if you had parents who gave you some options to say, okay, you decide, then not so bad. But when you grow older, then this is where, if you had good parenting that gave you the option of how to say yes and no, and what does it feel like, you'd probably grow up being able to do that. But if you didn't have that, then you will struggle at this space in time. Okay? So you can get help. Talk to the people around who do not fall into that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay?
Any more questions? So there is no more question. Just like to end. So today we have heard two excellent speakers who've been so gracious to us to spare the time and to make us understand how certain things can resist us from excelling the best of us and how can we overcome them. I really want to thank Dr. Valerie and Dr. Dheeraj for giving us the time. We're very grateful for all the insights that you have given us today. We also want to thank you, all the participants who have took some time out of their schedule to hear us and join this session. We really hope this session will be a blessing to you, and you can take home some messages and later on apply in your life. If there are any more questions, if then you can always come back to us, and you're most welcome to come and ask those questions, and we can reach out to the two speakers today. Also, if you want to join ICMDA, you're most welcome. As we close for today, I would like to request Dr. Valerie, ma'am, if you would like to close the session with prayer.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Lord, for this session and for the good questions that came, the openness in asking and understanding. We hope that all who came with an open mind and an open heart to understanding the challenges of people with addiction. We pray for those who have come and who may be struggling in their own lives with some of these issues, and we hope that you will touch them and guide them as they continue to seek help and strengthen themselves. We also pray that the people who have put together this program will be blessed for their efforts and their continued care for the development of the young people, the students, and the young medical doctors and dentists. We offer our days, our work, and our service in your most holy name. Amen.